Welcome back to another edition of What Did I Miss?
What did I miss?
After my first video about all the theater references in Hamilton, I asked you if I missed any. It turns out I missed 26 of them. So here they are, 26 more theater references in Hamilton. This video is dedicated to Malik Minert, who at the age of 9 is watching my videos and teaching himself to play piano. I'm super proud to be part of your journey, and if you out there have a similar story, I'd love to hear from you. Alright, here are the criteria for how these references were chosen. 1. They had to be intentional, as in Lin had to probably intend it. 2. It had to be uncanny, meaning that the reference is obvious and not just a coincidence. It had to quote a specific phrase that wasn't just a common phrase, or it could be a reference to a specific situation. And 3. It would have to be something having to do with the theater, so live plays and live musicals. So on that note, our first category of references are stage musicals that started out as movies.
Diamond in the rough.
Yes, my diamond in the rough.
So Lin probably was influenced by the original Aladdin, which was an animated film, not stage musical. And then of course Aladdin opened on Broadway the year before Hamilton. So sure, why not? This is by far the one that people brought up the most.
Screw your courage to the sticking place.
I just want to mention that this is not only a reference to Beauty and the Beast, but also to Macbeth. See, Hamilton first quotes Macbeth in his letter to Angelica when he writes,
Tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day.
So Angelica, writing a letter back to Hamilton, also quotes Macbeth. The fact that this reference works for both Macbeth and Beauty and the Beast is even more amazing.
Head full of fantasies of dying like a martyr.
Yes.
Dying is easy, young man. Living is harder.
Dying is easy. Comedy is hard.
That was Peter O'Toole in the 1982 film My Favorite Year. So this was originally not a movie musical, but it did have this gem. But of course, the movie is actually quoting a famous actor. Strangely enough, the original quote isn't exactly in this form. Quote Investigator narrows it down to several people who it's usually attributed to, including Edmund Kean, Edmund Gwenn, and Donald Crisp. Early versions of the quote came from a story where the sick Edmund Gwenn was told, "All this must be terribly difficult for you," to which Gwenn responded, "Not nearly as difficult as playing comedy." In a sort of weird twist to this reference, My Favorite Year later was adapted into a Broadway musical by Lynn Ahrens and Stephen Flaherty. But I don't think they used this line. The closest we came to it was,
Professional show business comedy is harder than may seem.
I practiced the law, practically perfected it.
The phrase practically perfected might be a reference to Mary Poppins, which used practically perfect in a dialogue scene.
As I expected, Mary Poppins practically perfect in every way.
But then when it opened on Broadway in 2006, that line had turned into an entirely new song of its own.
I'm practically perfect in every way.
What makes this reference practically perfect is that Lin is going to be in the new Mary Poppins movie. Alright, the next category we have are historical references that sometimes double for theater references. And even though they constantly mention New York City, I wasn't counting that as a reference because that's just historically accurate, and Hamilton was often known as the New York founding father.
He's kind of the New York founding father.
That is, unless you want to step outside and go now.
I know where to find you. Piss off and watching this show now.
In Blow Us All Away, we get a play within a play, which is a time-honored tradition going back at least to that other Ham, Shakespeare's Hamlet. Philip Hamilton confronted George Eaker at the Park Theater on Theater Alley during a performance of the play The West Indian. The song even mentions Broadway, even though historically this theater wasn't near what we consider today the theater district. However, things did not turn out well for Philip. Maybe he had bad luck because at the beginning of the song, he's whistling, which may be a reference to the superstition that it's bad luck to whistle in a theater. The way this came about is that in an earlier era, many of the stagehands in the theater were sailors who would whistle in order to give commands on when to raise or lower the curtain or a backdrop. And if you whistled at the wrong time, potentially it could lead to somebody getting crushed by something on stage. So perhaps this could be seen as a foreshadowing of Philip's fate.
I have the honor to be your obedient servant, A. Burr.
I remain, gentlemen, your obedient servant, OG.
So the Phantom of the Opera also ends his letter, your obedient servant, and then some initials. But it's also apparent that Lin did extensive research because he knew that the correspondence between Hamilton and Burr involved letters that ended with your obedient servant and then their first initial and their last name. So this is actually historically accurate. But it mirroring something in Phantom probably didn't hurt when Lin was thinking of reasons to include it.
32,000 troops in New York Harbor. 32,000 troops in New York Harbor.
So here the theory is that 32,000 is sung repeatedly 3 times, and 3 times 32,000 equals 96,000, which was the showstopper from Lin's own In the Heights.
96,000, get the dough, 96,000, we get dough.
Historically, this is perfectly accurate because British Admiral Howe did have 32,000 troops. And I guess they do sing it 3 times, although the 3rd time is a little soft, so it's possible that this is true. Our next reference is one from the world of hip-hop. Now, a lot of people mentioned hip-hop references, which of course don't fit the criteria that they all have to be theater references. But there was one that sort of took a twist.
Only 19, but my mind is older.
Is clearly from Mobb Deep's Shook Ones Part 2.
I'm only 19, but my mind is older.
It's even credited in the official liner notes. However, there's a very similar line in Rent.
You look like you're 16.
I'm 19, but I'm old for my age.
So the specific age is the same, and the specific idea of being older than the age is also there. Now, I don't really think that Prodigy from Mobb Deep, may he rest in peace, was referencing Rent, but it may be possible that Lin was referencing Rent and Mobb Deep. So our next references I like to call semi-official references because these are ones that Lin actually confirms, so we know they're true.
I have one song in Hamilton that is just my little secret love letter to Andrew Lloyd Webber. That's like the only rap in 7/8, and it's right after the first duel.
Lee, do you yield?
You shot him in the side, yes he yields. I'm satisfied.
Lin says the brief appearance of 7/8 meter in Meet Me Inside is a love letter to Andrew Lloyd Webber's The Temple from Jesus Christ Superstar.
How do I count 7/8? Can you touch, can you heal me? Christ.
Will you touch, will you mend me, Christ? Won't you touch, won't you heal me, Christ?
And if you're not sure what 7/8 meter is, it basically means the music recurs in patterns of 7 beats rather than the usual 2, 3, 4, 6, or 8 beats that you find in music. Here, I'll show you.
Lee, do you yield?
You shot him in the side, yes he yields. I'm satisfied. No, we gotta clear the field.
Go, we won.
7 is usually subdivided into a group of 4 beats and a group of 3 beats. Here you can see the group of 4 followed by the group of 3 with a stress beat to indicate the subdivision.
History is happening in Manhattan. We just happen to be in the greatest city in the world. In the greatest city in the world.
Lin says that the Schuyler Sisters was his version of One Short Day in the Emerald City from Wicked.
One short day in the Emerald City. One short day to have a lifetime of fun.
He doesn't directly quote One Short Day, but both are about women being enchanted by the sights and sounds of the big city.
Outrun,
Outrun,
outlast,
outlast.
hit him quick, get out fast.
Blah.
Lin says the Chicka-Plow line was subconsciously influenced by all the fight onomatopoeia in West Side Story.
I say I want the Jets to be the #1.
Then never stop. Boom, ba, boom, catch,
Who is the best? C'est moi.
So when Lafayette says, "Who is the best? C'est moi," he's making a reference to the musical Camelot, which has a song called C'est moi.
That mortal who these marvels can do, c'est moi, 'tis I.
And this is also confirmed when he mentions that he's Lancelot,
The Lancelot of the revolutionary set.
which is the character in Camelot who sings C'est moi. Lin not only confirms this reference, but mentions Camelot frequently as one of the shows that he heard a lot growing up.
I grew up in a house where cast albums were almost always playing. Man of La Mancha, Camelot.
Our next references are what I would call unconscious references, meaning that Lin put them in there, but they were not exactly intentional. They're basically references to In the Heights, which Lin also wrote. So in essence, he's just referencing his own brain because as a writer, he probably has go-to rhymes and phrases that just form easily. For example, last time I mentioned Spending Spree, which Lin says was purely accidental. Here are a few more.
The $10 founding father without a father got a lot farther by working a lot harder, by being a lot smarter.
I'm proud to be your father, 'cause you work so much harder. You are so much smarter.
I'm searching and scanning for answers in every line, for some kind of sign. Combing the stars in the sky for some sort of sign. Alexander.
Hi.
It's good to see your face. Anyway.
It's good to see your face.
Anytime.
Hold up a minute, wait.
Before we get to our final category, here are a few honorable mentions. And I call them that because these references aren't exactly uncanny, but are looser in nature and involve ideas that might have influenced Lin, but which he ultimately transformed. These include the ballet from Fiddler on the Roof, which is likened to the Schuyler Sisters, the upbeat tongue-in-cheek song from a tyrannical king in Jesus Christ Superstar, sung by King Herod, being likened to King George, and the use of a narrator like Judas in Jesus Christ Superstar, and Che in Evita, who, similar to Aaron Burr, tells the story of a protagonist who dies before the final curtain. And Judas is even more linked to Burr in that he sings about being aware that he's going to be vilified in history for betraying Jesus, just the same way Burr is going to be vilified for shooting Hamilton. This can even be seen as part of a larger tradition of narrator anti-heroes, such as El Gallo from The Fantastics, the leading player from Pippin, the MC in Cabaret, and Officer Lockstock in Urinetown. I credit Les Mis with influencing the story of tonight musically in a previous video, but also people believe there's a connection lyrically in the theme of toasting with friends that you find in the Toast song Drink With Me, and later in the song Empty Chairs and Empty Tables, about the loss of those drinking buddies. So I posted this one in the pinned comment, but I just wanted to reveal what I meant by it. Remember that whole moment in Take a Break where Angelica is singing about a comma changing the meaning of a phrase?
I noticed a comma in the middle of a phrase. It changed the meaning. Did you intend this?
Well, it turns out this comma was based on a real exchange of letters between Angelica and Hamilton. But I felt it was a distinct influence from Wit, which is a Pulitzer Prize-winning play about a poetry scholar that also includes a monologue from a poetry professor, no less, about a comma in John Donne's Death Be Not Proud sonnet.
And death shall be no more, comma. Death thou shalt die. Nothing but a breath, a comma, separates life from life everlasting.
In it, too, the comma is described as a breath, which is exactly what Angelica does when she's demonstrating the effect of the comma in the song.
With a comma after dearest, you've written my dearest Angelica.
And our final category are unofficial references that may or may not have been intentional. These are references that are unconfirmed but seem to have a distinct similarity to something in Hamilton.
How they perceive you.
Now, in the previous video, I said this was a reference to the last 5 years because in both shows it was about a man getting called out by a woman for cheating. But this reference to the song My Junk in Spring Awakening is a lot more uncanny. Both the finale of Rent and Stay Alive in Hamilton include the phrase I know being used to calm somebody on their deathbed while also shushing them.
I held my head up high.
I know. I know.
I should tell you Benny wasn't any.
Shh. I know.
And in case you thought we were done with Les Mis references, here's a few more.
Grab a friend, that's your second.
Your lieutenant, when there's reckoning to be reckoned.
The intro to Burn sounds a little bit like the intro to Stars. In Your Obedient Servant, the melody that Burr sings about looking back to where he failed is suspiciously similar to a line Javert sings in Javert's Suicide about falling. It's even in the same key, D minor.
I look back on where I failed.
I am reaching, but I fall.
Both Wicked and Hamilton rhyme Socrates with mediocrities.
Now for a strong central democracy. If not, then I'll be Socrates throwing verbal rocks at these mediocrities.
I never saw myself as a Solomon or Socrates. One of your dime a dozen mediocrities.
That could be a reference, or it could also just be that that's a clever rhyme and one of the only few words that actually rhymes with Socrates.
We signed a treaty with a king whose head is now in a basket. Would you like to take it out and ask it?
This rhyme can be found earlier in Into the Woods, sung by Little Red Riding Hood to a similarly humorous effect.
I sort of hate to ask it, but do you have a basket?
They will tear each other into pieces. Jesus Christ, this will be fun.
Sondheim's song The Little Things You Do Together also includes a similar line.
It's not so hard to be married, and Jesus Christ, is it fun?
So this reference from Sideshow seemed a little thin at first. I mean, yes, they are both at weddings, so of course they would introduce the bride and groom. However, it was not just that, it was introducing the groom and the bride and then a sister in that order. And the word bride was rhymed with the word side in both Hamilton and Sideshow. So at least it was a little more convincing.
Toast to the groom,
To the groom,
to the bride, from your sister,
Angelica,
who is always by your side.
See the groom, see the bride, see your sister by her side.
And this last reference really blew my mind. At the end of Hamilton, we're left with the question, who lives, who dies, who tells your story, sung in an a cappella choral arrangement.
Who dies, who tells your story?
At the end of Once on This Island, we get the answer to that question. We tell the story, sung in an a cappella choral arrangement.
We tell their
Thanks for watching the video. I'd like to thank my new patrons, Emma Nash, Rajesh Parekh, and Andy Shao. If you like these videos, please comment, subscribe, and if you really like them and want to support them even more, please join my Patreon. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.